this working? Am I on? I think I am. Thank you, Mason. Good morning. It's good to see everybody this morning. Glad that you are here. If you did not indulge, there's some things out there on the kiosk. Good things to eat. So between Bible class and worship this morning, you might grab something. If you didn't get a chance to eat breakfast this morning. Mary, did you get up and fix Mike breakfast this morning? So the answer would be, yeah, I got you. Got to give her a hard time. We're glad to see Miss Sheila back. Rumor has it that I said I had her booked to provide entertainment for the shower this afternoon, and she's going to ride the new Shetland that she got from Scotland, playing the bagpipes, wearing her kilt. So I don't know. That'd be entertainment this afternoon. But we're glad she's back, and she did have a good time. I do know that. That's all right. We'll explain it to you later, Jerry. Again. This past week really has been, and everybody has those weeks. You enjoy the weather and so on, but, you just have things that seem like everything's happening at once, and you got things piled up on you. And so just to be able to get here on Sunday morning, this feels good this morning. So I just want to tell you it's good to be here and good to see each of you. Now then, mowed the yard yesterday, and sometimes this morning my voice was like, but we're going to do good. We're in chapter 31, and what we've been doing, we've been looking at this idea of Jacob. Right now, there's part of this story, seriously, as we're going through here, there's part of this story that kind of doesn't make sense. And so you got to read a couple of 3 more chapters over, and then it kind of explains and it makes more sense. And so there's a couple of things that, because I cheated and I read ahead, trust me, that was something I never did in school, was to read ahead. In fact, I was just telling the story to Joyce back there a while ago, my senior year of college. I thought I had everything squared away. Of course, been 5 years in college. And it's at the point where my dad says, okay, I'll buy some of your books, but as long as you've been there, you pay your own tuition. So it's like, okay, I can do that. I get ready to graduate. I think I'm getting ready to graduate. I've been in and talked to my counselor, 3 different times, through that fall and spring. Well, I go in to order my graduation stuff because my folks say, yeah, no, you're going to walk. We're going to watch this. I go in, they say, well, you can't graduate. You're still 20 hours short. And I was like, 20 hours short? So I looked in what I had to have. Now, mind you, I had 18 or 20-something hours in physics, 18, 20-something hours in math and all this, and I had to take a general physical science class. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So I was able to take 12 hours on campus, and I found some classes that I needed that satisfied my PE end of it, in health and first aid and this kind of stuff. You could take by correspondence. Well, if you've been around as long as I had been, you knew guys that had taken those correspondence courses. So I borrowed the courses. My girlfriend retyped them for me, and I went in and took the final, got A's and all that stuff. But the best one was the physical science class, because the first day of class, this guy gets up, and he's into astrology and talking about, how the universe was made from this large explosion. First question I asked him was, where'd the energy come from? And he looked at me, and so I gave him fits the whole hour. It was on purpose. It's like, hey, I'm a senior. What's he going to do? And I did. And at the end of class, he said, excuse me, young man, would you come down here? So I go down after class, and he says, here is a copy of the test schedule. He said, don't come to class except to take the test. I said, you got it. So that was one of those classes where it worked out really good for me. I don't know about anybody else. But we look at this, and so going ahead makes sense of what we've covered. Now, last week we stopped where Laban and Jacob, we know that what has happened. Well, Jacob took off. Laban comes after him. Jacob travels 10 days. Laban travels 7 days, so he's really hooking up, and he catches him right there. But before he gets there, this voice comes to Laban and talks to Laban and tells him, you don't talk good or bad about Jacob. You understand? Okay. So when he gets there, what is Laban's attitude toward Jacob? We know from some of the speech that is dialogue that we have, what was Laban's intent? Let's put it like that. What was Laban's intent? Hostile. Because he tells him, I could destroy you right now. Now, this attitude is what we're talking about, and this intent is what we're talking about, that doesn't make sense, because then when they talk about this, it comes down in God, the God of Abraham. So, hang on here. Because Jacob tells him that if the God of my father, who Laban, I guess, had said, has mentioned that this voice told him not to speak good or bad. And so he says, if the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac. All right? That's specifically talking about his earthly dad, that you have fear of Isaac. Isaac's still alive. Isaac is a very influential man, and he has lots. Now, this also makes me think, and we don't have record of it, but if we look at it, was there communication between Rebekah's family and Laban, her brother? I'm going to say that there probably was, because you think Rebekah probably tried to keep up with what happened to Jacob when he left? And the answer to that is, yeah, I think so, because she could send somebody and kind of keep up with what was going on. So in this communication, does Laban understand how Isaac has also? So what Jacob is saying right here, and this is the reason why he tried to get as far as he could, the closer I can get to where my dad is, the less likely Laban is to do something evil to me, because he's afraid of what? He's the fear of Isaac. Now, God talked to him, but what has Laban, and I know that Laban looks at how God has prospered Jacob with the flocks and the different things like this. He looks, but does Laban really understand the power of the God, Jehovah? And the answer to that is no, I don't think he does. So what Jacob is telling him is that because God talked to you, you've got that, but your fear of my father, Isaac, and what he would do to you in revenge is what has kept you from doing this. Now then, this sentence makes more sense. Because when you read it, it's like, okay, well, what's the fear of Isaac got to do? But it's because Isaac is still there. But because of God, what God said to you, and because of your fear of my father, Isaac, Dad, you would have sent me away empty-handed. You would never have even let me take my wife and kids from Haran. You would have sent me away same way I came, with just a staff. God has seen my affliction and the toil of my hands. So he rendered judgment last night in that conversation that he had with Laban. So then Laban replied to Jacob, and once again Laban is still harboring this thought of what I could do to this guy right now. The daughters are my daughters, and the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. What's he talking about right here? Why would he want the daughters and the children? Why would Laban want these in this? Now think about the time frame in which we're talking about. Is that free labor? Oh, free labor. And with free labor, you can increase your herds. You can increase it because you got more people to. So Laban's whole deal. He's still looking at this. You call it the Wall Street investment, if you will, right here. But he's still thinking on the physical side of this. Laban doesn't understand who this God is that talked to him. He doesn't understand that. But he's still looking at this, and he's claiming all this. What has Jacob gotten credit for? Think with me about that for just a moment. What has Jacob gotten credit for? When he went in and told his wives, what did they say? Well, yeah, because Daddy took all our stuff. You ain't done nothing. That's all. And it's like, we're going to take a look at Jacob in just a little bit in a kind of a special way, because there's some things that he has to overcome. All right? So Laban is afraid that when Jacob tells Isaac what he was treated for, that the way he was treated could be bad for Laban. So this is all mine. So Laban's trying to put a guilt trip again on Jacob, which Jacob has just been a servant his whole life, right? And he says, all this is mine, but. So now come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. Okay, now without reading any further, does this covenant really make any sense? Because what is a covenant? It's a contract. Greg said it's a contract. That's right. Contract between two individuals. Why do these two guys need a contract? Well, he's getting ready to be 500 miles separated. Now then, it doesn't make sense until you go on down and you take a look at it. So they gathered up stones and they did all this kind of stuff. And here's the deal. May the Lord, in verse 49, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. If you mistreat, now Laban's kind of, setting this thing up, but the real truth's going to come out here in just a minute. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is the witness. Then he comes down, and this heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness that I will not pass this heap to you for harm, and you will not pass this heap to me for harm. What is Laban thinking right here? When Isaac hears about Jacob's story and what Jacob's story is going to be to Isaac about what Laban did to him, what is Laban afraid of? Retribution. Or just plain and simple, let's tell it like it is, what we would think of, revenge. He's coming back, you did what to my kid? Even though mom sent him away and so on. But Laban in this is where we get the truth of why this covenant was made. Laban is fearful of who? And that's the reason why Jacob said, God of my father, Abraham, the fear of Isaac. Now this covenant makes sense because Laban reveals what he doesn't want. I don't want you coming up here and, messing with me after you go home and tell Dad. And so they get this together, and his mindset is still only on taking care of himself in this regard. All right? So in verses 54 and 55, so Laban's mindset, we see this in verse 52. So early in the morning, in the last part of it then, says that they offered sacrifice on the mountain. He called his kinsmen to the meal. Everyone ate, spent the night there. And then early in the morning, Laban arose, kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them. And the in-laws finally left. First real story we have about how wonderful it was when the in-laws left, you know. So he leaves. So Jacob's got it made now, right? Hey, I mean, seriously, think about this guy. He just missed getting executed by his father-in-law, or something really bad happening to him from his father-in-law. And his father-in-law finally leaves, and now then he's looking forward to meeting this brother that, oh, last time I saw him, he had a plot to kill me. Think with me for just a moment. If you were Jacob, would you still believe in God? Serious question. Think about it. We got the story and we, oh yeah, well, what if all that was happening to me? What would I be thinking? What would you be thinking? And when you reflect on the last 20 years of Jacob's life, he left stolen as a birthright. And what does the name Jacob mean? Let's talk about this one. What does the name Jacob mean? Deceiver. Is there anything in a name? He deceived his dad to get the birthright. He deceived his brother to get the birthright. He got the blessing from his dad. He deceived in the regard that, that birthright doesn't mean anything if you're dead. Why don't you let me have it and I'll give you a bowl of soup. So what has his life been? And then he goes there and then Laban accuses him of, well, you've been doing this and your herds are getting bigger and mine are, and you've done this. I'm going to ask you a question because in our society today, as a father figure role model, which he now has 11 children, right? Now, how's that? That's better. You got 11 children. What kind of a role model is Jacob as a man to all these sons? When has Jacob stood up for himself? His sons are watching this. And brothers and sisters, this does have an impact. And we're going to see in a couple of chapters from now what kind of impact that it has. And it is, in this regard, maybe not a positive, very positive thing. And in the same way today where we don't have fathers who stand up and take the responsibility, we're seeing similar behavior. Or where there is no father in the family. So we'll look at this, but I want you to think, because sometimes we just look at Jacob, but at the same time, what kind of an image does Jacob portray during this? If I were to ask you now, if I could give each one of you a piece of paper and I said, write down what you think, how you see Jacob as a person. What would you say? Seriously, I'd like to See, what would you say, from what we kind of studied about this and so on, what would you say about Jacob?
Well, he was persistent. I mean, he stayed out for 14 years.
Well, he's been there for over 20, yeah. But now then, is that persistence or is that weakness because I'm afraid to go somewhere else?
Well, I don't think that for sure. But I think it does show a degree of, it shows some commitment. I mean, he could have given up at any point. And he signed up to do 7 years, and he did 7 years.
He had persistence, but
What'd you say?
he had persistence, but he didn't have gumption. I mean, he didn't have backbone. He didn't have stand up for himself until there at the end. I mean, he was working through it. He was acquiring it, but he just kind of sat back and took it
All the way.
all the way.
And King,
God is blessing him by helping him gain the herds and the things that he wants. So God is blessing him, so he's not all bad, but he's doing some wrong things.
I didn't say he was bad.
Yeah.
But he's, okay, and I agree with what Anthony said. He's weak. When I look at him as an individual in that regard, Greg,
Yeah, there's another feature to him as well. Tommy and I were discussing this. He's also a family man, so, you know, he doesn't abandon his family to go here, there, and yonder. He's about his family, he's taking his wives, he's got his kids, you know, and maybe he's not the athlete of the year kind of guy, but there is that family feature to him, that everything he does is to protect his family.
and when we think about this, he's trying to take everything that he thinks he has worked for. Is that a good way to look at it? Because as Gene pointed out, well, he worked 7 years and didn't get the one he worked for. So he had to work 7 more to get that one. And it's like, then I worked 6 more in order to get herds and flocks. And so,
There's a surprising little information about talking to God through all this, you know. They're not having God conversations, they're not meeting and not making sacrifices and this, that, and the other. There's very little God discussion.
and we're going to talk about that just a little bit later on because of some things that happened.
So
Gene?
I sense, Larry, you're sharing with us that he doesn't seem to be very principled. You know, he listens to his mom in the whole scene part, right? He doesn't really stand up and say, something doesn't feel completely right here. He's pretty quick to just jump on the bandwagon and listen to that, right? So it's not a person that thinks, takes the ground and says, this is right, I'm going to follow this right path. I mean, God still uses him, God works through his weaknesses.
And that's what we want to look at, is that regardless of the person that he was, God used him. Because look how long this story is in here relating to this. But God is showing us that regardless of who we are or our status, can he use what is broken to prepare his what? And the answer is yeah. And you can flip over to Exodus 33, verse 1, where God repeats this to Moses, that he says, I made the promise that I made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that I'm going to take you to this land that I promised them. And then it gets ugly from there because he calls them, I'll take you and I'll put an angel in front of you, but I ain't going with that group. And Moses says, what do you mean you're not going? He said, because they have a heart that I cannot stand to be around. And I'll send an angel to guide you, but I'm through. And from that point on, you can go through and look at the scripture. God refers to them when he's talking to Moses as your people, does not refer to them as his people. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting concept as well. So this promise that he's making is coming through Jacob, and when we look at Jacob, we don't see the kind of figure that we would pick to be in this God line as we come down through here. We would maybe look at somebody differently or something like that. All right. So then we go into, so Laban returns home. And then we go into, and I think that this is interesting because what Greg just talked about is that we don't have a lot of dialogue where we see that Jacob spent time talking with God. Now, we also find out that, Jacob spent as much time away out in the field as he could because of the way he talked about Laban. I stayed out there at night, froze to death. I was out there in the heat, and I was in there. And, of course, then we know when we came home one time, his wife, hey, bud, you're with me tonight. I gave her a potato for you, so you're in my camp tonight. I mean, we look at the situation, we look at things, and it's like, really? Did Jacob ever stand up and just, and I mean, even when he stands up, to Laban, it's after the fact that what has Laban just done to him? Totally humiliated him by going through and turning over everything that the man had. And then he says, well, I've had it with, and he talks back a little bit, but it was only because everybody in that crowd was now kind of on his side because Laban didn't find it. It's just, God's got a plan. And that's what we have to remember. God has a plan. Because then when we go to the beginning of chapter 32, now as Jacob went on his way, and look at the term, it's multiple. Angels of God met him. Doesn't say what they talked about. It just says that the angels of God met him. And Jacob said when he saw them, this is God's camp. So he named the place Mahanaim. Then Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. Now then, let's just talk, and this is not Christian, okay? This is humanistic. Let's talk battle strategy. If I'm Jacob, what kind of strategy would you have against a brother that had threatened to kill you? Probably want to have a plan and a backup plan so that you know what his intentions are before he gets to you and so on. And so, and this is where it sounds really, really ugly. Especially, what are you willing to sacrifice for that? To find out what his intentions are, because if his intentions are still on the same and I send somebody there, odds are not going to be good. How would you have liked to have been this servant that Jacob says, okay, you come to me and I want you to go to my brother Esau. Wait a minute, time out. I'd like to talk this over. Could we send Bubba over here? He's the one that polishes the brass. I got an important job. Let's send. Because what would you think's going to happen? You're a dead man. Kill the messenger. And that sends a message, right? When you kill the messenger, that sends a message. So Jacob, now then, I wonder, and going back to Greg, because Greg's prompted that because of, I thought this same thing, that there's not much conversation. Did these angels in this conversation give him this plan, or did they talk this over, or was it something totally different? See, we don't know. There's no record of what this communication's about.
This is one of those many moments in Scripture where you would really like to know the rest of the behind-the-scenes story.
Exactly.
But you don't.
I'd like to know what was said. And the other part about it is, because now, correct me, because you went through that my understanding is in the language then, that when you have a plural, it had to be more than two. Me and you couldn't be us. Me and you would just be me or you. And so there had to be three or more for it to be plural. So when you talk about angels right here, there had to be three or more in this regard. Did these angels reveal themselves to him to show him that he was being protected? Did they while all this stuff was going on with Laban? Was it to show that he is being protected now? Is it? We don't know. But it's interesting that he has communication. What do you think about Jacob's peace of mind? Did Jacob have peace of mind? I don't think he's been at peace since he left Rebekah and Isaac the first time, 20-something years ago. He has been tormented day and night. And now then, not only is he tormented, but now then he has physical fear to go along with that mental anguish. And I wrote this. He sent messengers before him to Esau. How would you like to have been one of those messengers? It's like, say, what? I knew you didn't like me. So did he pick the guys that he liked, or did he pick the guys that were slackers? That's one of those things where you kind of wonder, too, because I'm not sending my best boy that way. So, I got a pretty good idea who went as messengers. And I think that it's interesting then in verse 4, because I'm not sure that they were all up on this idea because of what he says. He also commanded them, saying. So from what I get from this is that they probably weren't all too up on this idea. And so he commanded them, no, this is what you're going to do, because, bad things could happen to you in that regard as well. And thus you shall say to the Lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now, so that he understands. And Esau probably already knows. But I've been there. I haven't been doing anything, I just been under my father-in-law's roof. And then here's where the bribe starts. Because what does Jacob tell them to say then? I have oxen and donkeys and flocks and male and female servants. What's he putting up right there? Collateral for the leniency of my life. Isn't that what he's doing? We today really don't know anything about bribes in politics or anything like that, so I know that this is a new concept to us, Yeah, right. It's as old as mankind, right? Is there anything new under the sun? No. Nothing new in that human nature. So Jacob is trying to put it out there that I have all these things. And Esau, if that's what it takes, I will give this to you. Now, I think that this is interesting. And this tells me something. When we were talking about battle strategy and so on and so forth, if the messenger goes and comes back, we came to your brother Esau, and furthermore, he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. All right, now the first thing that you think of is what? Oh my gosh, run. They're coming to kill me. Except, time out. Strategically speaking, would I send notice to the guy that so he's got a chance to run? So now then, there's got to be a different thought process. So what is his intention? Because he sends these guys back. He tells, and they know that I've got 400 guys with me coming to you, but why would he tell me so that I've got a chance to, and we never look at this from Esau's side of it. We always look at it from Jacob's side. When Esau gets this word from Jacob, what's Jacob's intent? You've already taken everything that belonged to me, right? So what is Jacob's intent? With the name deceiver, Jacob means deceiver, then Esau's looking at this as, what does he want? So if I put on this parade, how will Jacob respond? Is Esau also kind of feeling out what Jacob's response is going to be? You know, you send this bribe to me. I remember that soup you served me. Right? Has Esau still got that thought in his head? I also remember what you did to Dad in fixing up that chow your mom fixed up. And then, yeah, I remember that. So Esau is also trying to figure out, hey, what is he up to? What is I love that sound. Those kids yelling. So, you got to love that. So what is Jacob doing? So he has serious thought process as well. And that's the reason why he brings an escort, because he's unsure. And so, then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. So he divided the people who were with him and the flocks and the herds and the camels into 2 companies. For he said, if Esau comes to one company and attacks it, then the other company will escape. You find out how much he liked you by what company you were in. In the company of his family, you're pretty good. You're in that other company, might need to work on a few things, right? And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, Jacob saying, you're the one that said to me, return to your country and to your relatives, and I will prosper you. And now my brother's coming to kill me. But he says, I am unworthy of all the loving kindness. Oh, the heart of Jacob. Man hasn't known peace probably in his lifetime, and especially in the life that he can remember since he left home. And yet he comes before God and he says, I am unworthy of all the loving kindness and all the faithfulness which you have shown to your servant. For with my staff only, when he left Isaac and Rebekah, he had only his staff, and I crossed the Jordan. And now I have become 2 companies of animals and men and women. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him that he will come and attack me and the mothers with the children. For you said, I will surely prosper you and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which is too great to be numbered. Jacob remembers. I don't know the conversations, Greg, but he remembers what God has spoken to him. Be hard not to when you saw that ladder with angels ascending and descending and so. And he remembers that. And then when he comes to him and says, you go back, Jacob would have stayed there as a servant maybe but God told him to leave. One?
When you go back to read that, it said, I will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land,
Yes.
and I will do everything that I have promised.
And then he repeats
He has to remember that when he's going through these hard times.
that God has, and when Jacob looks, he said, I went with just, all I had was my staff. And look what I have now. Because he's getting ready to send 580 head of livestock ahead of him to his brother. 580 head. I don't care if it is goats. You realize how big a goats, sheep, camels, cattle. I mean, 500. Cowgirl, you be making them little doggies get along for a while, you know. And he sends them in waves like that. So we're going to take a look at this, and we'll start with chapter 32 and verse 13. next. But we look at this and looking at what Jacob's going through and what his thought process is in this regard. Thank you all this morning. Appreciate you very much.